Well, the New York Mets have added another starting pitcher into the fold, Griffin Canning, on a 1-year, $4.25 million deal. Canning is entering his age 29 season, coming off a year where he led the American League in earned runs allowed, 99 runs given up. Now, he pitched to a 5.19 ERA. He did at least set a career high with 171 and two-third innings pitched, only struck out 130 in those 170 plus innings. So not a big strikeout guy that you can envision transitioning to be some late inning weapon. This is simply starting pitcher depth. Looking at the stuff from last year, his fastball got absolutely rocked. Averages that's 93.4 miles per hour with very little whiffs on it. Gave up 16 home runs on that pitch alone. Slider was his best swing and miss pitch. There's some good characteristics there, but that got hit pretty hard too. Changeup had the most success this past season. But overall, I don't see a lot to like here with Griffin Canning. I'm just going to be honest here. Outside of my trust in this front office, I'm not a big fan of this move because I don't think he's better than Tyler McGill or Paul Blackburn. So in my mind, if I was to create a depth chart right now, the Mets starting pitchers, it'd be Kodai Senga, I don't know, maybe Frankie Montas, Clay Holmes, David Peterson. It's those three in some order, whatever. Then it would be, I don't know, maybe McGill. Maybe it's Budo if you love him. Maybe it's Blackburn. I do understand the need for depth. But here's my one issue with this signing. Right now, it's being reported as just a straight major league deal. $4.25 million, $1 million in performance bonuses that he can attain. Is it a split deal, though? Is there something in that contract that says the New York Mets can option Griffin Canning to the minor leagues? If there is, I love it. I absolutely love it. Last year, Shintaro Fujinami signed a contract with the Mets. 1 year, it was over $3 million. I think it was $3.35 million. At the time, it was reported a major league deal, but we learned later from some reporting by Joel Sherman that there was no wording in that contract that prevented him from getting optioned down to the minor leagues. Now, Fujinami was different. He only had a year of service time, so he still had minor league options available. Griffin Canning does not have minor league options available. He's got 5 years of service time. So unless there's something specifically written into the contract or it is a split deal, which means, hey, you make $4.25 million if you're on the big league roster. If you're in the minor leagues, you make X. It would appear like he will be on the Mets roster. And that's where I don't necessarily like this move unless you're dangling Tyler McGill or Paul Blackburn on the trade market and you got some suitors and you're going to clear one of them. I understand you can never have too much starter depth. I completely get that. And on the surface, just in a vacuum, is it good that the Mets have added this guy to be starter depth? Absolutely. He pitched 170 plus innings last year. That's not nothing. And you also have to wonder, you get him outside of Anaheim, where they're just horrible at developing pitching. You bring him to the Mets, maybe there is some upside they can tap into. Obviously, they like something in his profile. Maybe it's his slider. I think that's probably his best pitch, although the changeup again performed pretty well last year. Maybe they're looking at his sinker and they're saying, hey, we can actually give you a real sinker and we can ditch the fastball. The four seam that just got rocked. Or maybe they believe that they can change the characteristics on that fastball, maybe get some more ride on it, and maybe the fastball can work. I ultimately trust the Mets pitching lab. I do like the fact that he threw a ton of innings, and he does give you another stretched out arm that can eat up some the back end of your rotation. But trying to roster Griffin Canning and Paul Blackburn come opening day, if they're not in your rotation, I mean, I guess it could work, right? One of them's the swingman, one of them's the sixth starter, but now you got to have 6 lights out relievers that you trust if those two guys are taking up spots. And Jose Budo, he does not have an option. Tyler McGill does, so you can put McGill in AAA. But Jose Budo does not have an option. So Budo has to be on the roster or you lose him. Now, could Jose Budo pitch out of the bullpen? Absolutely. Maybe he's one of those 6. But I am very curious how this all works itself out. And typically starting pitchers and the depth that you need there, it will work itself out. 2 guys might get hurt in spring training, and all of a sudden Griffin Canning is a valued member of the Mets rotation, and maybe the Mets get a lot out of him. He's only 29 years old, and he's been pitching with the Angels. I still trust the Mets to get the most out of pitchers, and I trust the decision makers. So based on that alone, I'm okay with this signing, but I can't just ignore that he was not very good, and I don't necessarily think he's better than a couple of guys on their roster right now, and trying to roster all of them is going to be very interesting. With that said, maybe Jose Budo's on the trade market. Maybe they're going to swing a deal for Luis Castillo and Jose Budo is going the other way, and that happens tomorrow. And then it's like, oh, okay, so Castillo slides into the Sean Manaea spot that we all think could be coming down the pipeline. So Manaea's off the board. All right, they're going to have Castillo in that rotation with Senga, Holmes, Manaea, Peterson. That's your 5. And then you have Blackburn, McGill, and Canning competing for that 6th spot. McGill probably on the outside looking in because he has the option, so you can just plant him in Syracuse. And then one of those guys gets the starting spot, and one of those guys in Blackburn or Canning gets the long man spot in the bullpen. It can work out, and it probably will find a way to work itself out. But again, on the surface, just looking at the roster situation, a 1-year deal for Griffin Canning does not make that much sense to me. But if we find out tomorrow, more reporting comes in, and this is a split deal where Griffin Canning will get $4.25 million with the New York Mets, but he can be optioned down to the minor leagues, or he can not make the roster and start there in Syracuse, right? If that's really what this contract is, and it's similar to signing Shintaro Fujinami last offseason as a high upside reliever where you were hoping you got something, but if you didn't, and if he showed up to spring training and he wasn't better than the other guys that were competing for a bullpen spot, he just represented more depth. I love this move. It really just comes down to that. It comes down to what this contract really is once we see all the details. And then it also comes down to what the Mets' follow-up moves are. Don't expect, though, that Griffin Canning is the last move of this rotation. Don't think that David Stern's saying, all right, I added the 3 starters I needed. I got Montas, I got Holmes, I got Canning. I like the prices on these 3. I'm good. I'm out of the market on Manaea. I'm not considering trading for Luis Castillo. Jack Flaherty, Walker Buehler, those names, they mean nothing to me. We're done. That's definitely not what happened here. This is just about depth. My only issue with it is trying to figure out how that depth fits on the Mets' active roster come opening day. And does that prevent them from carrying potentially a better relief pitcher that could be in the fold there that would help them potentially at the end of games and leverage, but instead you got 2 guys who are, swingman 5th starter types that are just clogging up spots on your roster. That's my only issue, but we'll see if it actually is one once all this sorts itself out. Anyway, that's going to be all for today's edition of Locked On Mets. I appreciate all of you for tuning into the show today. Make sure, if you don't want to miss out on any of your Locked On Mets content, you're subscribed if you're watching on YouTube. You hit that notification bell so you know when any new video drops or if I go live. Make sure if you're listening on the audio side of things for the podcast, you follow, rate, and review wherever you get your podcasts. You can follow me on X at Finkelstein Ryan. Follow the show at Locked On Mets. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listener, your first watch every single day. Now for your second watch, head over to YouTube and check out the first ever 24/7 streaming channel that covers everything in the world of sports. We're talking about Locked On Sports Today with our local hosts from each team, league-wide hosts from each league, by Locked On Sports Today, streaming 24/7 on YouTube.